Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
हरे कृष्णा अमित।
हरे कृष्णा माता जी।
कैसे हो?
जी अभी थोड़ा बेटर फील कर रहा हूँ। आप कैसे हैं माता जी?
बस बढ़िया।
कृतिका माता जी अभी तक ज्वाइन नहीं किया।
हरे कृष्णा। मेरी आवाज सुनाई अमित?
जी माता जी।
मेरी आवाज सुनाई दे रही है आपको?
जी जी।
ओके। आई थिंक 9 चैप्टर ऑफ ईशोपनिषद तक हम लोग कंप्लीट कर रहे हैं। टुडे वी विल कंटिन्यू विद द रेस्ट ऑफ द चैप्टर्स। 9 श्लोका तक कंप्लीट कर रहे हैं। 10 श्लोका से स्टार्ट करेंगे आज। So how was the Mayapur trip and all? Very nice. उसके बाद में फिर कोई खबर आया आपको? हरे कृष्णा।
हरे कृष्णा।
मुझे शायद कंटिन्यू नहीं करे आप और कृतिका है। You two have to continue with this. We will complete the course by anyhow. ठीक है।
मेहर प्रभु का क्या हुआ?
ओ उनका ड्यूटी का टाइमिंग कुछ डेली इट्स नॉट लाइक रेगुलर। आज है सो कल नहीं है, वैसा कुछ एडजस्टमेंट में प्रॉब्लम हो रहा है उनको।
अच्छा जी। जॉब करते हैं।
चलो माँ कंटिन्यू करो।
ये थोड़ा सा तो दिक्कत हो गई।
कोई बात नहीं, मैं हेल्प करूंगी आपको, प्लीज। अन्या देवाहुर्विद्याय
अन्यथ एवाहुर्विद्याय न्यायधियाहुर्विद्याय इति शुश्रूम धीरानम् येनस्तद् पिशाचक्षिरे. Translation: the wise have explained that the result is derived from the culture of knowledge, and that a different result is obtained from the culture of nations. परपट भी पढ़ना होगा क्या माता जी?
और क्या?
Okay. Parpat. As advisor in chapter 13 of the Bhagavad Gita, one should culture knowledge in the following way. One should become a perfect gentleman and learn to give proper respect to others. 2. One should not pose himself as a religionist simply for name and fame. 3. One should not become a source of anxiety to others by the actions of his body, by the thoughts of his mind, or by his words. 4. One should learn forbearance even in the face of provocation from others. 5. One should learn to avoid duplicity in the dealings with others. 6. One should search out a bona fide spiritual master who can lead him gradually to the stage of spiritual realization. And one must submit himself to such a spiritual teacher, a spiritual master, render him service, and ask relevant questions. In order to approach the platform of self-realization, one must follow the regulative principles enjoined in the revealed scriptures. Eighth, one must be fixed in the tenets of the revealed scriptures. One should completely refrain from practices which are detrimental to the interest of self-realization. Tenth, one should not accept more than he more than he requires for the maintenance of the body. 11th, one should not falsely identify himself with the gross material body, not should one consider those who are related to his body to be his own. 12th, one should always remember that as long as he has a material body, he must face the miseries of repeated birth, old age, disease, and death. There is there is no use in making plans to get rid of these miseries of the material body. The best course is to find out the means by which one may regain his spiritual identity. 13. One should not be attached to more than the necessities of life required for spiritual advancement. 14. One should not be more attached to wife, children, and home than the revealed scriptures ordain. 14. One should not be more attached, 15. One should not be happy or distressed over desirable and undesirables, knowing that such feelings are just created by the mind. 16th, one should become an unalloyed devotee of the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, and serve him with rapt attention. 17th, one should develop a liking for residence in a secluded place with a calm and quiet atmosphere favorable for spiritual culture, and one should avoid congested places where non-devotees congregate. 18th, one should become a scientist or philosopher and conduct research into spiritual knowledge, recognizing that spiritual knowledge is permanent, whereas material knowledge ends with the death of the body.
Yeah, these are
These
the 18 elements what is been described. These are required. There are certain do's and most of them are don'ts. Okay. So which are required prerequisite to advance spiritually. Yeah. Continue, Amit.
okay. These 18 items combine to form a gradual process by by which real knowledge can be developed. Except for these, all other methods are considered to be in the category of nascience. Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, a great acharya, mentioned that all forms of material knowledge are merely external features of the illusory energy, and that by culturing them, one becomes no better than an ash. This same principle is found here in Sri Ishopanishad. By advancement of material knowledge, modern man is simply being converted into an as some materialistic politicians in spiritual guise decry the present system of civilization as satanic. But unfortunately, they do not care about the culture of real knowledge as it is described in the Bhagavad Gita. Thus, they cannot change the satanic situation. In the modern society, even a boy thinks himself self sufficient and pays no respect to elderly men due to wrong type of education being imparted in our universities. Boys all over the world are giving their elders headaches. Thus, Sri Upanishad very strongly warns that the culture of nations is different from that of knowledge. The universities are, so to speak, centers of nations only. Consequently, scientists are busy discovering lethal weapons to wipe out the existence of other countries. University students today are not given Instruction in the regulatory principles of brahmacharya celibate student life, not nor do they have any faith in any scriptural injunctions. Religious principles are taught for the sake of name and fame only for not for the sake of practical action. Thus, there is animosity not only in social and political fields but in the field of religion as well. Nationalism has developed in different parts of the world due to cultivation of nations by the general people. No one considers that this teeny earth is just a lump of matter floating in immeasurable space along with many other lumps. In comparison to the vastness of space, these material lumps are like dust particles in the air because God has kindly made these lumps of matter complete in themselves. They are perfectly equipped with the necessities for floating in space. The drivers of our spaceships may be very proud of their achievements, but they do not consider the supreme driver of these greater, more gigantic spaceships called planets. There are innumerable suns and innumerable planetary systems also, as influential as infinitesimal
Infinite.
uh, parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. We shall creators are trying to dominate these unlimited planets. Thus, we take repeated birth and death and are generally frustrated by old age and disease. The span of human life is scheduled for about 100 years, although it is gradually decreasing to 20 or 30 years. Thanks to the culture of nations, befooled men have created their own nations within these planets in order to grasp sense enjoyment more effectively for these few years. Such foolish people draw up various plans to render national demarcations perfectly, a task that is totally impossible, yet for this purpose, each and every nation has become a surface of anxiety for others. More than 50% of nations' energy is devoted to defense measures and thus spoiled. No one cares for the cultivation of real knowledge, yet people are falsely proud of being advancement in both material and spiritual knowledge. Sri Upanishad warns us of the faulty type of education, and the Bhagavad Gita gives instructions as to the development of real knowledge. This mantra states that the instruction of Vidya, knowledge, must be acquired from Dhira. A Dhira is a Dhira is one who is not disturbed by material illusion. No one can be undisturbed unless he is perfectly spiritually realized, at which time on neither bankers nor laments for anything. Dhira realizes that the material body and mind he has acquired by chance through material association and but foreign elements. Therefore, he simply makes the best use of a bad bargain. The material body and mind are bad bargains for the spiritual living entity. The living entity has actual functions in the living spiritual world, but the material world is dead as long as the living spiritual sparks manipulate the dead lumps of matter. The dead world appears to be a living world. Actually, it is the living souls, the parts and parcels of the supreme living being who move the world. The dhiras have come to know all these facts by hearing from the superior authorities and have realized this knowledge by following the regulative principles. To follow the regulative principles, one must take shelter of a bona fide spirituality master. The transcendental message and regulative principles come down from the spiritual master to the disciple. Such knowledge does not come in the hazardous way of nascent education. One can become a dhira only by submissively hearing from a bona fide spiritual master. Arjuna, for example, become a dhira by submissively hearing from the Lord Krishna, the, the personality of Godhead himself. Thus, the perfect disciple must be like Arjuna and The spiritual master must be as good as Lord himself. This is the process of learning Vidya, knowledge from the Dhira, the undisturbed. An Adhira, one who has not undergone and training of a Dhira, cannot be an instructive leader. Modern politicians who pose themselves as Dhiras are actually Adhiras, and one cannot expect perfect knowledge from them. They are simply busy seeing to their own remunerations in dollars and cents. How then can they lead in mass of people to the right path of self-realization? Thus, one must hear submissively from a dhira in order to attain actual education.
Hare Krishna. So, first thing we have to acquire a knowledge to have a demarcation between the spiritual body as well as the material body, the what is temporary and what is permanent. For that, we need a right spiritual master who can shows us an enlightenment and take on to the pathway, which ultimately leads to the liberation. That is most important. So, whatever the education system nowadays we have in a present society is not imparting the required knowledge, which is required for the liberation. And whatever the politicians and the big personalities who are there in and around us, they are not imparting the same knowledge which is required for the education. So the a true person who can liberate us here, the example is given that of Arjuna and Lord Krishna. So he should be so good as the Lord. At least he should be from the disciplinic succession, because he'll undergo all the process which is required for a guru to teach the disciple. So it is very important. So whom under whom we are getting trained. Yeah. Hare Krishna. Next one.
Krishna, mantra 11. Vidyayam ka vidyayam sayas tad vedobhyam saha avidyayam ratayam tattvaha vidyayo yamatam ashunite. Translation: only one who can learn the process of nescience and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. But since the creation of the material world, everyone has been trying to attain a permanent life, but the laws of nature are so cruel that one has been able to avoid the hand of death. No one wants to die, nor does anyone want to become old or diseased. The law of nature, however, does not anyone allow anyone immunity from old age, disease, or death. Nor has the advancement of material knowledge solved these problems. Material science can discover the nuclear bomb to accelerate this process of death, but it cannot discover anything that can protect man from the cruel hands of old age, disease, and death. From the Puranas, we learn of the activities of Hiranyakasipu, a king who was very much advanced materially, wanting to conquer cruel death by his material acquisitions and the strength of his nations. He underwent a type of meditation so severe that the inhabitants of all the planetary systems became disturbed by his mystic powers. He forced the creator of the universe, the demigod Brahma, to come down to him. He then asked Brahma for the benediction of becoming Amara, by which one does not die. Brahma said he could not award the benediction because even he, the material creator who rules all planets, is not Amara, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 8.17. Brahma lives a long time, but that does not mean he is immortal. Hiranya means gold and Kasipu means soft bed. The cunning gentleman Hiranyakasipu was interested in the two things, money and women, and he wanted to enjoy them by becoming immortal. He asked from Brahma many benedictions in the hopes of indirectly fulfilling his desire to become immortal, since Brahma told him that he could not grant the gift of immortality. Hiranyakasipu requested that he not be killed by any man, animal, god, or any other living being within the 8,04,000 species.
84 lakh species.
Sorry, 84 lakh species. He also asks that he not die on land, in the air or water, or by any weapon. In this way, Hiranyakasipu foolishly thought these guarantees would save him from death. Ultimately, however, although Brahma granted him all these benedictions, he was killed by the personality of Godhead in the form of Nrsimha, the Lord's half lion, half man incarnation, and no weapon was used to kill him, for he was killed by the Lord's nails, nor was he killed on the land, in the air, or in the water. He was killed on the lap of that wonderful living being, Nrsimha, who was beyond his conception. The whole point here is that even Hiranyakashipu, the most powerful of materialists, could not become deathless by his various plans. What then can be accomplished by the teeny Hiranyakashipu of today, whose plans are thwarted from moment of moment? Sri Ishopanishad instructs us not to make one-sided attempts to win the struggle of existence. Everyone is struggling hard for existence, but the laws of material nature are so hard and fast that they do not allow anyone to surpass them. In order to attain a permanent life, one should be prepared to go back to Godhead. The process by which one goes back to Godhead is a different branch of knowledge, and it has to be learned from revealed Vedic scriptures such as uh, Upanishads, Vedanta Sutra, Bhagavad Gita, and Srimad Bhagavatam. To become happy in the life and attain a permanent, blissful life after leaving this material body, one must study this sacred literature and obtain transcendental knowledge. The conditioned living being has been forgotten his eternal relationship with God and has mistakenly accepted the temporary place of his birth as all in all. The Lord has kindly delivered the above mentioned scriptures in India and other scriptures in other countries to remind the forgetful human being that his home is not here in this material world. The living being is a spiritual entity and he can be happy only by returning to the spiritual home. From his kingdom, the personality of Godhead sends his bona fide servants to propagate this message by which one can return to Godhead, and sometimes the Lord comes himself to do this work. Since all living beings are his beloved sons, his parts and parcels, God is more sorry than we ourselves to see the sufferings we are constantly undergoing in these material conditions. The miseries of the material world serve to indirectly remind us of our incompatibility with dead matter. Intelligent living entities generally take note of these reminders and engage themselves in the culture of vidya or transcendental knowledge. Human life is the best opportunity for the culture of spiritual knowledge, and a human being who does not take out advantage of this opportunity is called a Naradham, the lowest of human beings. A path of avidya or advancement of material knowledge for sense gratification is the path of repeated birth and death. As he exists spiritually, the living entity has no birth or death. Birth and death apply to the outward covering of the spiritual, the body. Death is compared to the taking off and birth to the putting on of outward garments. Foolish human beings who are grossly absorbed in the culture of avidya nescience do not mind this cruel process. Enamored with the beauty of the illusory energy, they undergo the same miseries repeatedly and do not learn any lessons from the laws of nature. Therefore, the culture of vidya or transcendental knowledge is essential for the human being. Sense enjoyment is in the diseased material condition must be restricted as far as possible. Unrestricted sense enjoyment in this bodily condition is the path of ignorance and death. The living entities are not without spiritual sense. Every living being in his original spiritual form has all the senses, which are now materially manifested, being covered by the material body and mind. The activities of the material sense and perverted reflections of the activities of the original spiritual senses of his diseased condition. The spirit soul engages in material activities under the material covering. Real sense enjoyment is possible only when the disease of materialism is removed in our pure spiritual form, free from all material contamination. A real enjoyment of the sense is possible. A patient must regain his health before he can truly enjoy sense pleasure again. Thus, the aim of human life should not be to enjoy perverted sense enjoyment, but to cure the material disease. Aggravation, aggravation of the material disease is no sign of knowledge, but a sign of avidya, ignorance. For good health, a person should not increase his fever from 105 degrees to 107 degrees, but should reduce his temperature to the normal 98.6. That should be the aim of human life. The modern trend of material civilization is to increase the temperature of the feverish material condition, which has reached the point of 107 degrees in the form of atomic energy. Meanwhile, the foolish politicians are crying that at any moment the world may go to hell. That is the result of advancement of material knowledge and the neglect of the most important part of life, the culture of spiritual knowledge. Sri Ishopanishad herein warns that we must not follow the dangerous path leading to death. On the contrary, we must develop the culture of spiritual knowledge so that we may become completely free from the cruel hands of death. This does not mean that all activities for the maintenance of the body should be stopped. There is no question of stopping activities, just as there is no question of wiping out one's temperature altogether when trying to recover from a disease. To make the best use of a body bargain is the appropriate expression. The culture of spiritual knowledge necessitates the health of the body and mind. Therefore, maintenance of the body and mind is required if we are to reach our goal. The normal temperature should be maintained at 98.6 degrees, and the great sages and saints of India have attempted to do this by a balanced program of spiritual and material knowledge. They never allow the misuse of human intelligence for diseased sense gratification. Human activity diseased by a tendency towards sense gratification have been regulated in the Vedas under the principles of salvation. This system employs religion, economic development, sense gratification, and salvation. But at the present moment, people have no interest in religion or salvation. They have only one aim in the life, sense gratification. And in order to achieve this end, they make plans for economic development. Misguided men think that religion should be maintained because it contributes to economic development, which is requested for sense gratification. Thus, in order to guarantee further sense gratification after death in heaven, there is some system of religious observance, but this is not the purpose of religion. The path of religion is actually meant for self-realization, and economic development is required just to maintain the body in a sound, healthy condition. A man should lead a healthy life with a sound mind just to realize vidya, true knowledge, which is the aim of a human life. This life is not meant for working like an ass or for culturing avidya for sense gratification. The path of vidya is most perfectly presented in Srimad Bhagavatam, which directs a human being to utilize his life to inquire into the absolute truth. The absolute truth is realized step by step as Brahman, Paramatma, and finally Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead. The absolute truth is realized by the broad minded. man who has attained knowledge and detached by following the 18 principles of the Bhagavad Gita described in the Parpattu Mantra 10. The central purpose of these 18 principles is the attempt of transcendental devotional service to the personality of Godhead. Therefore, all classes of men are encouraged to learn the art of devotional service to the Lord. The guaranteed path to the aim of Vidya is described by Srila Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which we have presented in English as the nectar of devotion. The culture of Vidya is summarized in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.14 in the following words. तस्माद् एकेन मानसा भगवान् सत्त्वातं पथिः सर्वोत्याभायो कीर्तितव्याससा ध्याय पूज्य sasa nityada. Therefore, with on pointed attention on should constantly hear about, glorify, remember, and worship the personality of Godhead, who is the protector of the devotees. Unless religion, economic development, and sense gratification aim toward the attainment of devotional service to the Lord, they are all simply different forms of nations, as Sri Ishopanishad indicates in the following mantras.
Yeah. This sloka explains about the avidya and the vidya. Okay, vidya is the real knowledge by which we further progress in a bhakti, okay, and attain a stage where we are liberated. And avidya is like an ignorance. We are just stuck in a material enjoyment. And here we example is given that of a Hiranyakashipu, Hiranya, uh, and there are so many Hiranyakashipu in day-to-day life. So everybody is stuck up like, and they wanted to do the sense enjoyment, and they forget the relationship with Krishna. And instead of engaging the senses in the service of the Lord, they direct their senses for their self enjoyment, which is a temporary body, forgetting the permanent soul which is there inside. So actually, Guru help us to go in a proper directions and help us to reach a stage of liberation through the set of spiritual practices which is been described. So a person who is not having knowledge about the Lord is said to be avidya, and he is equivalent to Naradama, and definitely that person is going to have a downfall. Again, he has to fall into the cycle of the birth and death. Yeah. Next.
So 12. अंधं तमाप्रविशन्ति ये सम्भूतिम् उपासते ततो भूया इवाते तमो यायुसम्भूत्यं रतः. Translation: those who are engaged in the worship of demigods enter into the darkest region of ignorance, and still more so do the worshippers of the impersonal absolute.
Yes.
Purport: the Sanskrit word Asambhuti refers to those who have no independent existence. Shambhuti is the absolute personality of Godhead, which is absolutely independent of everything. In the Bhagavad Gita 10.2, the absolute personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, states, Name vidhuho suraguna prabhat prabhavam na maharsayah aham adhiro hi devanam maharsinam sa sarvasaha. Neither the hosts of demigods nor the great sages know my origin or opulences. For the every respect, I am the source of the demigods and sages. Thus, Krishna is the origin of the powers delegated to demigods. Great sages and mystics, although they are endowed with great powers, these powers are limited, and thus it is very difficult for them to know how Krishna himself appears by his own internal potency in the form of a man. Many philosophers and great rishis or mystics try to distinguish the absolute from the relative by their teeny brain power. This can only help them reach the negative conception of the absolute without realizing any positive trace of the absolute. Definition Definition of the absolute by negation is not complete. Such negative definitions lead on to create a concept of one's own, thus on imagination that the absolute must be formless and without qualities. Such negative qualities are simply the reversals of relative material qualities and are therefore also relative. By conceiving of the absolute in this way, one can at the utmost reach the impersonal effulgence of God known as Brahman, but one cannot make further progress to Bhagwan, the personality of Godhead. Such mental spectaculars, the speculators do not
Speculators.
speculators do not know that the absolute personality of Godhead is Krishna, that the impersonal Brahman is the glaring effulgence to the transcendental body, or that the Paramatma, the super soul, Super Soul is his all-pervading planetary representation, nor do they know that Krishna has his eternal form with the transcendental qualities of eternal bliss and knowledge. The dependent demigods and great sages imperfectly consider him to be a powerful demigod, and they consider the Brahman effulgence to the absolute truth. But the devotees of Krishna, by dint of they are surrendering unto him, and their unalloyed devotion can know that he is the absolute person, and that everything emanates emanates from him. Such devotees continuously render loving service unto Krishna, the fountainhead of everything. In the Bhagavad Gita 7.20 and 23, it is said that only unintelligent, bewildered persons driven by a strong desire for sense gratification worship the demigods for the temporary relief or of temporary problems. Since the living being is materially entangled, he has to be relieved from the material bondage entirely to attain permanent relief to the spiritual plane, where eternal bliss, life, and knowledge exist. Sri Upanishad therefore instructs that we should not seek temporary relief of our difficulties by worshipping the dependent demigods who can bestow a only temporary benefit. Rather, we must worship the absolute personality of Godhead Krishna, who is all attractive and who can bestow upon us complete freedom from material bondage by taking us back home, back to Godhead. It is started in the Bhagavad Gita 7.23 that the worshippers of the demigods can go to the planets of the demigods. The moon worshippers can go to the moon, the sun worshippers to the moon, etc. Modern scientists are now venturing to the moon with the help of rockets. But this is not really a new attempt. With their advanced consciousness, human beings are naturally inclined to travel in outer space and to reach other planets, either by spaceships, mystics, powers of demigod worship in the Vedic scriptures. It is said that one can reach other planets by any one of these three ways, but the most common way is by worshipping the demigod presiding over a particular planet. In this way, one can reach the moon planet, the sun planet, and even Brahmaloka, the topmost planet in the universe. However, all planets is the in the material universe are temporary residences. The only permanent planets are the Vaikuntha lokas. These are found in the spiritual sky, where the personality of Godhead Himself predominates, as Lord Krishna states in the Bhagavad Gita 8.16. Abrahama Bhuvan Loka Unado avartano juna mama mama upatyayo tu konteya punarjanmo na vidyate. From the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. Sri Ishopanishad points out that one who worships the demigods and attains to the material planets still remains in the darkest region of the universe. The whole universe is covered by the gigantic material elements. It is just like a coconut covered by a shell and half filled with water. Since its covering is all right, the darkness with water since at the darkness within it is dense, and therefore the sun and the moon are required for illumination. Outside the universe is the vast and unlimited Brahmayoti expansion, which is filled with Vaikuntha Lokas, the biggest and highest planet in the Brahmajati is Krishna Loka or Goloka Vrindavana, where is the Supreme Personality of Godhead Sri Krishna himself resides. Lord Sri Krishna never leaves Krishna Loka, although he dwells there with his eternal associates. He is omnipresent throughout the complete material and spiritual cosmic manifestations. This fact this fact present everywhere, just like the sun. Yet he is situated in one place, just as the sun is situated in its own undeviating orbit. The problems of life cannot be solved simply by going to the moon planet or to some other planet above or below it. Therefore, Sri Upanishad advises us not to bother with any destination within the dark material universe, but to try to get out of it and reach the effulgent kingdom of God. There are many pseudo worshippers who become religionists only for the sake of name and fame. Such pseudo religionists do not wish to get out of this universe and reach the spiritual sky. They only want to maintain the status quo in the material world under the garb of worshipping the Lord. The atheists and impersonalists lead such foolish pseudo religionists into the darkest regions by preaching the cult of atheism. The atheist directly denies the existence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the impersonalists support the atheists by stressing the impersonal aspect of the Supreme Lord. Thus far, we have not come across any mantra in Sri Ishopanishad in which the Supreme Personality of Godhead is denied. It is said that he can run faster than anyone. Those who are running after other planets are certainly persons, and if the Lord can run faster than all of them, how can he be impersonal? The impersonal conception of the Supreme Lord is another form of ignorance arising from an imperfect conception of the absolute truth. The ignorant pseudo religionists and the manufacturers of so-called incarnations who directly violate the Vedic injunctions are liable to enter into the darkest region of the universe because they mislead those who follow them. These impersonalists generally pose themselves as incarnations of God to such foolish men have any knowledge at all. It is more dangerous in their hands than ignorance itself. Such impersonalists do not even worship the demigods according to the scriptural recommendations. In the scriptures, there are recommendations for worshipping demigods under certain circumstances, but at the same time, These scriptures state that there is normally no need for this. In the Bhagavad Gita 7.23, it is clearly stated that the results derived from worshipping the demigods are not permanent, since the entire material universe is impermanent. Whatever is achieved within the darkness of material existence is also impermanent. The question is how to obtain real and permanent life. The Lord states that as soon as one reaches Him by devotional service, which is the on and only way to approach the personality of Godhead, one attains complete freedom from the bondage of birth and death. In other words, the path of salvation from the material clutches fully depends on the principles of knowledge and detachment gained from serving the Lord. The pseudo religionists have neither knowledge nor detachment from material affairs, for most of them want to live in the golden shackles of material bondage under the shadow of philanthropic activities disguised as religious principles by a false display of religious sentiments. They present a show of devotional service while indulging in all sorts of immoral activities. In this way, they pass as spiritual masters and devotees of God. Such violators of religious principles have no respect for the authoritative acharyas, the holy teachers in the strict disciplic succession. They ignore the Vedic injunction Acharya Pasana on must worship the Acharya and Krishna's statement in the Bhagavad Gita 4.2 Evam Parampara Praptam. The supreme science of God is received through the disciplic succession. Instead to mislead the people in general, they themselves become so-called acharyas, but they do not even follow the principle of the acharyas. These rogues are the most dangerous elements in the human society because there is no religious government. They escape punishment by the law of the state. They cannot, however, escape the law of the Supreme, who has clearly declared in the Bhagavad Gita that envious demons in the garb of religious propagandists shall be thrown into the darkest religion of hell. Mataji, this is Bhagavatam, right? BG,
Yes. This is
BG,
no. Bhagavad Gita 16.19 to 20 sloka.
sorry, Bhagavad Gita 16:19 verse 20. Sri Ishopanishad confirms that these pseudo-religionists are heading toward the most obnoxious place in the universe after the completion of their spiritual master business, which they conduct simply for sense gratification.
Hare Krishna. So this entire mantra says about the worship of the people who are there in a mode of a passion, who worship the demigods to get some benefit, material benefit. They are much engaged in pleasing their senses and they have a attachment towards the family, wife, children, the property, possessions, self. So they don't try to follow any disciplinic succession or they wanted to follow the acharya or his principles and at least try to get liberated. Okay. And another set of people are the impersonalists, they also follow the same principles and they don't want to progress in the bhakti. And as it is described in Bhagavad Gita, those who worship Krishna will go to Goloka, and those who worship the demigods will go to their planets, and those who worship the ancestors or the demons, they go to the respective place. It has been clearly mentioned, isn't it? So it is a choice of that individual devotee, or like which path he wanted to go. So with utmost, what is after so many births and deaths, and we get a human life. And human life is the only life where we get the consciousness. If that consciousness is being not en route for the enlightenment or the knowledge or to know about the Lord or to establish our relationship with Krishna, we are simply wasting the time. So there are different types of mudhas or naradhamas who are there who forget this, and they try to just time pass their life in unfruitful things. But ultimately, they will not head towards the liberation. Again, they'll fall trap into the cycle of birth and death, come back, and God knows when they get the liberation. So this is all for today. I think hope will stop here.
Okay, Mataji.
Yeah, tomorrow we'll try to complete 13, 14, 15.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. वाञ्छा कल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः. Thank you participants for your active participation. See you all tomorrow at 8 p.m. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.